Hey guys, my name is Loveless, and this time we're back with Quirk Knife, chapter 34. Um, I'm trying to do this as quickly as possible, and I found out what was the buzzing that's been going on. Well, not really buzzing, the noise that's been going on behind some of the videos, and it's my computer. So, so I'm gonna try a few things to see if it'll stop the noise, because trying to do it in post, it just makes the volume go super low, and I don't want that to happen. But it's just whatever. But let's go straight into it. Izuku turned around to ask the strangers what to do next once he stepped through the black door, but instead it slammed shut in his face, leaving the strangers on the other side. This room was far darker and colder than the other one. Izuku could see his breath with each exhale. He noticed the ache in his bones had become more prominent, but he slowly stepped forward, crossing the room that seemed to have no end. "Hello?" Izuku called out, only hearing his voice echo in return. But it sounded different at the same time. "Hello? Is anyone there?" He tried again, eyes darting around as the shadows seemed to be playing tricks on him, his heartbeat beginning to accelerate. "Are you lost?" Izuku spun around and tripped over his own 2 feet in pure fear, hitting the ground as water splashed around him. Since when had the ground been wet? Izuku squinted at the small figure in front of him, a flicker from the lantern lighting up the stranger. Yet, it wasn't a stranger. "Izu," little Kachan tilted his head. "I told you not to run off. You're lucky I'm super fast." Izuku could only stare at the blonde toddler with spiky hair, red eyes shining in the dark. "Come on, I can bring you home." Kachan extended a single hand with a worried expression. The whole moment seemed far too familiar. Despite the feeling in the back of Izuku's mind telling him not to take the hand, he still placed his own against the smaller palm. The darkness around him warped suddenly, and Kachan faded away, a bright flash leaving Izuku's knee deep in calm water. His hand still extended, yet this time he was the one with the smaller arm, wearing his chunky red sneakers and oversized khaki shorts. Kachan looked at him with soft eyebrows, looking at Izuku's chunky hand in his direction, his hero uniform being completely soaked as if he was seated in the water. When had he fallen in? Izuku looked up from the log above. Shadowy figures with sharp teeth and long tongues sneering at him. He averted his eyes immediately. Older Kachan watched them with shearing intensity, his costume torn like he's been in a battle, wrists exposed and swollen and bruised. For the first time in a long time, Izuku met Kachan's eye properly, yet the boy wasn't wearing his usual sneer. His face seemed peaceful, maybe even longing. The rumble from the shadowy figures were growing louder, and it made Izuku's body ache even more. "Kachan, take my hand." His tongue felt thick, just as frustrating as Izuku remembered, but it had some sort of effect on the blonde. His eyes seemed to glow for a moment as he reached out, hand shaking ever so slightly with hesitation. Izuku felt a smile grow on his face, one that was small yet genuine, but it didn't last long. The currents of the river grew more intense, and Kachan stumbled back slightly, his calm expression not wavering for a moment as his body began to be pulled under. Izuku's words were cut off completely as he couldn't even form words anymore. But Kachan was being pulled down the river, not even fighting the current. So Izuku did the only thing he could think of. He let go of the shore and prepared to dive after the blonde, but the shadowy figures swooped down with their sharp teeth covered in red and grabbed him, pulling him under the water, and he lost sight of Kachan. Again. Shoto stared at the white wall even as the door opened slowly, footsteps padding in quietly. "Shoto?" He turned his head slowly, looking over where Fumi stood somewhere awkwardly, Natsu shifting his weight from foot to foot behind her. They were all staring at another for several tense moments, until Shoto turned his attention back to the needles in his forearms, watching the fluid slowly drip through the tube. Fumi cleared her throat and walked in further, taking a seat in one of the empty chairs, as Natsu opted to lean against the doorframe, looking everywhere but at his younger sibling. "How are you feeling?" the oldest Todoroki asked in a quiet voice, as she picked at her skin around her nails, the heel of her toe clicking repeatedly as her leg bounced. Shoto didn't look at her, but instead continued staring down at the loose threads of the hospital blanket, simply humming in return. Fumi drew in a deep breath and nodded with uncertainty. Her gray eyes skipping from object to object around the room, her lips pursed into a thin line as she looked back over her shoulder towards Natsuo. Fumi looked back at Shoto once more. "Why didn't you call Dad, your teacher? I think, Yamada. He said that you specifically asked for us, not Dad. Hypothermia." Shoto looked out the window and let his head loll to the side, his stomach flipping around from the silence. It had been like this for quite some time, but that didn't make it any less uncomfortable. "What?" Shoto hummed once again. "I don't know if you've received an email from UA, but the class was attacked by villains. It seems I overused my quirk, unfortunately giving myself hypothermia. I don't want Father to know." "Why?" Natsuo grunted again. "Fumi and I aren't your parents." Shoto stiffened as Fumi audibly inhaled, biting on her bottom lip hard enough that it drew blood. "Obviously, I know that." Shoto snapped back without looking over at his siblings, his eyebrows drawn together in anger and frustration. "You know what? This was stupid. I'll find my own way home. Thanks for stopping by." "Shoto," Fumi began, but Shoto waved her off with a lazy hand. "We don't need to pretend here." The woman tilted her head. "Pretend?" "Yes," Shoto spat. "Pretending that you guys fucking care or whatever. It's fine. I'll take care of myself." Natsuo clicked his tongue and looked away. "Are you sure about that? Your state says otherwise. What is that supposed to mean?" "I already stated I have hypothermia. I don't want Father to know because he would have gotten angry." "No, I mean whatever the fuck is wrong with you." "Natsuo!" Fumi cried as she swiftly stood up from her chair. "That's enough. Nothing is wrong with Shoto. And it's not his fault UA failed at... No, we're not responsible for him. That's Dad's job. He's the bastard who had so many of us. He can take care of it." "Nat, we're still a family, and Shoto needs our help. I don't care. I have things to do, and I know you do as well." Shoto blinked harshly and shook his bangs from his eyes, shoulders beginning to shake unsteadily. Natsuo continued. "We both know how he is. How fucked up Shoto's been since Mom and Toya... Get out." Fumi looked over to her younger sibling with wide eyes, Natsuo taking a step back as well. "Shoto, please. We just want to make sure that..." Fumi paused as her eyes flicked over to the heart monitor connected to Shoto, listening to the rapid increased beating. She didn't continue that sentence. "Get out." Shoto repeated quietly as he continued to stare out the window, hands briefly tightening into fist. "Shh! Get out!" Shoto screamed as loud as he could, voice cracking as he finally turned, looking in their direction. "I can take care of myself. I shouldn't have called you, but they wouldn't leave me alone about it, so just fuck off already." Natsuo looked at him with disgust and rolled his eyes. "Fine. I've been waiting to fuck off since I stepped into this god-awful place. Have fun with your little temper tantrum, baby brother." The white-haired man turned and swiftly left the room, leaving Fumi standing anxiously in the doorway as she looked back and forth between both siblings, cheeks pink and eyes watery. "Go," Shoto mumbled. "I'll take a taxi. I should be home later this evening. Goodbye." Fumi gave one nod and turned to leave, but paused just outside the room and looked over her shoulder. "I'm sorry things have turned out this way, Shoto. Natsu is still having trouble dealing with things, even after all these years." Shoto fought the urge to cry. "So that means I'm expected to be perfect?" "Of course not." "Well, that's not what it seems like. As Natsu put it, something's wrong with me, and you two made that perfectly clear." "Shoto! Shoto, goodbye!" Shoto mumbled as he sunk deep into his bed and rotated, letting his back face his sister. His heart rate wouldn't calm down, so he closed his eyes and counted in his head, slowing his breathing to resolve his rapid heartbeat. Okay, I'll shut the door. No response. Should I come back later? No response. Fumi sniffled as Shoto assumed she must be crying. She had never been able to stay quiet when crying. She had never learned to do so, to be fair. Text me, us, if you need anything else. I don't have your number. What? I removed them from my phone. Goodbye. And Fumi turned around after that, and shutting the door a little bit more loudly than necessary as Shoto finally sat back up, grabbing his phone and opening it, looking through the very brief list of contacts. Fumi and Natsuo were still at the top of the list, but unused for quite some time, because this was all Shoto's fault. That's what father tells him. Hazashi looked over to his husband, not quite sure what to say. They'd been seated back in Shoto's hospital room as a nurse rebandaged his left arm. Meanwhile, Tsukachi was seated across the room with tissue pressed against his nose. If you're waiting for an apology, you ain't getting shit. Shoto spat, breaking the awkward silence. Yagi nervously fiddling with the loose threads of the armchair that he was seated in. You're lucky I don't plan on pressing charges. Do it then, Shoto shouted. Do it, and see what happens. Hazashi groaned and forced the angry man to look him in the eyes. We both know what will happen, honey. We'll lose money. Fuck you. Hazashi has dealt with Shoto for many years. All the way back when they were just second years at UA. Now they're 30 years old. And after all these years, Hazashi has never dealt with this version of Shoto Aizawa. Nothing could even compare to this. Don't take your anger out on me. Hazashi spoke calmly, maintaining healthy eye contact as his husband only frowned further. Fuck you. You're supposed to be on my side. I am on your side, Hazashi said, while pretending his words weren't hurting him. Your side meaning I want you to heal and be safe. So stop acting stupid. You're acting like a child. Hazashi could only sigh as he looked at the other two men who were wearing apologetic expressions. The nurse able to fix Tsukachi's nose effortlessly. There's no need for an apology. Tsukachi finally sighed. I understand Aizawa's under a lot of stress at the moment with these current events. The four men all looked at one another until Shoto opened his mouth again. Fuck you. Oh, for God's sake. Hazashi grunted in English. Are you done now, Shoto? You're being ridiculous. Choke. Hazashi decided to ignore him and turn back to Yagi and Tsukachi. I'm sure you both understand that Shoto is just simply concerned for the well-being of the three vigilantes. They saved several lives, after all. I think both he and I simply want to know how they're doing, that's all. Tsukachi wearing a pained expression as if keeping the truth was physically hurting him. Yagi just looking down at his hands. Tsukachi. Hazashi exhaled slowly. He knew he needed to be the one with his head screwed on tight between him and his partner. Please, are they okay? That information can only be provided. The world stopped and completely tilted on its axis as everyone's eyes slowly turned to Shoto, watching something they could never have prepared themselves. It was foreign to most, something Hazashi rarely saw, and it made everything seem so much worse. Eraserhead was crying. Hazashi has seen a few tears escape his husband every so often. Whether it be from a tough patrol or a dying cat in a movie, but never anything like this. His head tilted, was hanging low, large tears trailing down his face and fell from his chin. His back rising and falling quickly as his shoulders trembled violently. Sho? Hazashi asked quietly as he splayed a hand across Shoto's back, rubbing slow circles as he watched with concern. Yagi looked outright uncomfortable as his eyes kept eyeing the door, and Tsukachi simply were wearing a sympathetic expression, keeping his head bowed low as well. There was an awkward knock at the door as Hazashi looked up, Shinto standing there with eyebrows furrowed together and staring at Shoto. How are you, little listener? Hazashi asked, struggling to keep his voice stable as he flashed a weak smile. Shinto continued to stand there as he braced himself against the doorway, using one hand. I was just wondering where everyone... Why is he crying? Right to the point. Just like someone else Hazashi knows. Stress. Takachi smiled softly. Just stress. Shinso nodded slowly. His eyes thinned in a skeptical manner as he turned his attention back to Hisashi. The emotion and question in his eyes, clear. Hisashi could not offer an answer. Shinso refused to break eye contact, even taking a step forward, and that really shouldn't have been as threatening as it was. The boy chuckled softly and crossed his arms. Just wondering where my friends are, that's all. Think you could tell me? Hisashi looked at Takachi, then back at Shinso, while Shoto continued to cry. This was all a mess. You're not referring to the vigilantes, are you? Tsukachi frowned, because that would mean you're voluntarily obstructing justice, which is a felony. Shinso hummed. That's cool. Don't care. Never said jack shit, so don't go shoving words in my mouth. Hisashi groaned. Did people not understand that you're supposed to show the person who can literally toss you in jail some respect? Shinto turned to Hisashi once more and raised an eyebrow, lazily, waiting for a response. Hisashi couldn't give what he didn't have. Shinto opened his mouth to say something else, but his phone buzzed in his pocket, and he fished it out, eyeing whatever notification it was. Excuse me. He looked over to Tsukachi lazily. I don't think we've met. Who are you anyway? Hisashi wasn't sure what caused the change of heart, but once he realized what was happening, it was too late. Oh, sorry. My name is Numasa Tsukachi. What room are you keeping Chaos the Vigilante in? Tsukachi's eyes faded in an empty white as his facial expressions went blank. Shoto's head snapped up as Yagi's jaw dropped in pure shock that a kid would have the balls to use a quirk on a fucking police officer. Room 93, top floor of this building. Seems I'm done here, the boy said as he turned, stopping just before shutting the door. I was listening the entire time, by the way. I know why Aizawa was crying. And it's fucking disgusting that you're hiding the vigilantes that saved lives and treat them like some sort of villains. They saved every single life at USJ that was worth saving except for their own. People like you fucking disgust me. He shot one last look at Yagi, and Shinto slammed the door shut, his form whizzing past the door as he sprinted off. Tsukachi finally blinked in confusion and rubbing his eyes. Shoto snickered while still crying, Hisashi holding his head in his hands. What's going on? Tsukachi frowned at the changing atmosphere. Yagi stared at the door with his jaw slack, eyes wide, trying to process what he just witnessed. Nothing, Shoto grunted, and Tsukachi thinned his eyes. I think you're aware of my quirk. Fuck you, that's what's going on. What has Hisashi got himself into? Hitoshi ignored the pounding in his skull as he sprinted through the halls, ignoring the shouts and complaints as he threw the stairwell door open, taking 2 steps at a time. Hitoshi made his way up to the 7th floor and flew through the halls once more, only to see officers crowding the room 705, the one May told him he was supposed to enter. He swore and glanced at every possible place that they could be hiding, his 4 idiots being idiots like usual. Something smacked the back of his head and he swiveled around, eyes snapping to the pen on the floor. He thinned his eyes in the direction of the throw, locking eyes with one that were ice blue crouched behind a large crate of medical supplies. Hitoshi snuck over carefully, then dropped into a crouch as well, turning to see Dabi, May, and... How the fuck? The strange man from Aizawa's hell room. The strange man from Aizawa's hospital room. Blonde tuft of hair and lanky body was currently crouched over in an awkward angle. It's me, Toga, the man said in a cheerful voice, despite it not being Toga. He coughed up quite a bit of blood into a tissue, so I had to take the opportunity. Hitoshi rubbed his face in realization. Toga, how did you consume the blood? I ate the tissue, obviously. Obviously, Hitoshi echoed in a tired voice. What's the plan? You got the room number, right? Hitoshi nodded in confirmation. Brainwash Tsukachi. We'll probably get arrested soon. The room number is 931. All the way up there? Dabi cursed. Well, whatever. Toga can keep the officers busy for a moment. May is going to set off a loud radio she has, and we're going to run for the stairs. Hitoshi could only stare at his friends in disbelief for a moment. His chapped lips part as bloodshot eyes wide. Are you fucking kidding me? That is the shittiest plan I've ever heard of. Well, Izuku usually takes care of this stuff, Toga hissed, Just do it. With confidence, Toga stood up in the skeleton form of a man, walking over and talking to who knows what as May darted over to the reception desk, casually placing a small little box on it before walking away to the stairs. Hitoshi followed her lead as Dabi tried to awkwardly walk at his side, crouching down ever so slightly. May smiled and clicked the button as a recording of Hands Up radio with present mic began blaring at a ridiculously high level. The officers all jumped in looking for the source of the noise. In the moment of the distraction, and while Toga's form began to drip, they all made their way for the stairwell and jumped in. Toga struggled to put on a shirt and pants Dabi had been holding for her. 8, May mumbled as they kept climbing, finally reaching the 9th floor as they ran through the hallways once more, following the ascending numbers until they reached 31. Why no officers? Hitoshi mumbled, mainly to himself, help supporting Toga and May reaching out for the door handle. She froze. It's locked, she whispered, eyes wide in panic, looking back over her shoulder for help. Hitoshi could hear squeaking of running shoes as he swore loudly. Open it! I can't! Dabi stepped forward and tore the bandages off his hand, lighting a small blue fire in his palm. Move! He planted a hand against the metal door handle and watched as the metal crumpled under his hand, followed by him pulling it clean off the door. May nodded in approval and shouldered the door as it swung open. Tsukachi rounding the corner with several officers on his tail, including Yamada, helping Aizawa, yet the two were walking at a more leisurely pace. Toga yelled as Hitoshi pulled into the room with May, Dabi then slamming the door shut and standing there awkwardly. Welp, we can't lock it now. Hitoshi rolled his eyes and turned, struggling to see in the dim room as a slow beeping finally caught his attention from the bed in the far corner. Oh my god. Hitoshi felt his heart drop as he continued to pull Toga forward, the girl gripping onto his arms with a shaking hand. He didn't even notice the two heroes watching the group as they all stepped closer, even ignoring Tsukachi's shouts as the door flung open. As all the looks towards Izuku, the room grew silent and intense. It was as if everyone was holding their breath. It wasn't until May's legs gave out and Dabi had to catch her until all hell broke loose. Toga gripping the handrails of the hospital bed when the officers tried to grab her. Don't touch her! Dabi roared as another officer grabbed both his wrists harshly, some blood splashing onto the white floor as the man carelessly ripped some of the staples out of his arms. No! Toga screamed through tears as several others flinched from the sheer volume, and it didn't stop when the officers cuffed May. Toga only began to scream even louder. Aizawa started shouting after that, which only riled up Yamada, the blonde-haired finally letting his anger show as he shouted with his quirk. Someone Hitoshi would later recognize as Midnight tried to calm him down alongside Recovery Girl. Yet Hitoshi could only stare with a blank expression at the boy before him, even as an officer grabbed both his wrists and putting them into handcuffs behind his back, the metal digging into his skin. Izuku was barely visible underneath all the objects that were covering him, ranging from the tubes of needles of all sizes, and he was being supplied with oxygen, and his hair was still bloody, practically bandaged from head to toe. His eyes were shut, and he was laying completely still. His skin so gray he looked, well, dead. Is he dying? No one answered the question over all the shouting, and Hitoshi whipped his face around to the rest of the room and screamed louder than he ever has. I said, is he fucking dying? The room finally went still. Dabi's face crushed against the wall as Toga was pinned to the ground. May still limped as the officer was partway through trying to pick her up. Midnight had one arm wrapped around each Aizawa and Yamada's wrist, her heels digging into the ground as she kept the two from pouncing. Tsukachi backed up against the wall, looking at the heroes like they were vicious guard dogs. Policemen had their guns and tasers out, and Recovery Girl looked fed up in the corner, but now all eyes were on Hitoshi. Young man, the skeleton man wheezed, peering into the doorway. You shouldn't have done— Shut up, Hitoshi whispered. Just everyone shut the fuck up for once in your useless lives. Spit flew from his mouth as the police officer placed a warning hand on his shoulder, in which the purple-haired boy shrugged off. I asked you a question. Answer me. Tears were now flowing as Hitoshi looked around with pleading eyes. Please. Please. Tsukachi looked away as Recovery Girl walked to the center of the room. This has gotten ridiculously out of hand. Why couldn't you just tell the kids? Tsukachi, is information truly that private? He didn't respond as Recovery Girl walked over, getting up on a standing stool to get a closer look at Izuku and checked her watch, followed by a kiss on his right temple. You all need to take a breath, the woman said sternly. The situation has gotten everyone on edge, but that's not helping anyone. And you lot, she pointed at Aizawa, Yamada, Tsukachi, and the blonde man. You four are grown men. For Kami's sake, what's going on? What are you doing? Midnight slowly released her fellow co-workers and stood still, the gaunt man's face going pink and Tsukachi still refusing to meet Hitoshi's eyes. Recovery girl? Hitoshi whispered. Can you please answer my question? That's all I want. She looked at him for a long moment in contemplation, then scanning the other three troublemakers with a soft sigh. I'm sorry, Shinso. He isn't doing well, and I'm simply telling you the truth. This isn't to hurt you. Toga sniffled. Is he gonna die, miss? She hummed. I can't say for sure, dear. I'm sorry. On the way here, we lost his pulse more than once, but I can say that he's somewhat stable at the moment. He's fallen into an unconscious and has yet to wake up, although it's been nearly 24 hours. Dobby pressed his forehead against the wall. So he's in a coma. Recovery Girl nodded nervously. Yes. Hitoshi stared at the floor with huge eyes as his body trembled, Tsukachi approaching carefully. Shinso, was it? Are you alright? He couldn't even form words as the ground began to roll like waves in the ocean, and he suddenly felt clammy and cold all at once. Then his knees hit the ground hard. Let me go! May hissed suddenly, kicking the officer hard in the shins, then crawling across the floor, falling against Hitoshi, both of them taking shuddering breaths as they leaned on one another. The officer on Toga stood slowly, and the blonde did the same. She was the only one who hadn't been handcuffed yet, and she wrapped her hands around the other two, Dobby slamming the back of his head against the taller officer's chin, escaping in place against the wall, and sat beside the three younger children, letting Toga grip his knees in sadness. This is... Yamada swallowed thickly. How could you keep them separated from the news for so long? What gives you the right? The law, of course, but no one said anything. Well... Someone chirped from the doorway. I'm not liking what I'm currently seeing. Hitoshi rubbed his face against Toga's shoulder to rid himself of some tears and looked through the two girls' heads, trying to locate the new familiar voice. I'm upset I wasn't called sooner, Tsukachi. I'm quite a large part of this case and investigation, if I do say so myself, the creature said in an eerily cheery voice. And after what I've seen and heard, I do believe I have a chat with several people. Tsukachi swallowed and nodded. Afternoon, Nezu. The principal of UA continued forward, stopping by the pile of contained two of his students. Oh dear, this has gotten more complicated, hasn't it? Shinso? Hatsume? I'm afraid you two somehow gotten involved. Yeah, Hitoshi spat. And I don't regret shit. Me neither, May clarified while struggling to keep her brave face on. You guys don't understand anything. Who, Hatsume? Nezu said softly, patting her shoulder in an attempt to keep her calm. Adults, she hiccuped while thinning her eyes to those around the room. Why can't they just leave us alone? Not like they cared before. They only care now because it affects them. They're all selfish. Nezu leaned closer to the four kids as his eyes flickered to Izuku in the bed, then back as he spoke in a voice where no one else around them was able to hear. I'll take care of this. I've been studying chaos for quite some time. I find him curious. All of you, in fact. And I also understand none of you had it easy. With Aizawa, Yamada, and I'm assuming Kayama on my side, we have a positive chance. Don't worry, children. Nezu gave a small wink and turned, looking back to the adults. Tsukachi, I want a meeting room ready in 2 hours. I expect you to be there with your top officers, along with several heroes in which I will contact. Those of them being connected to the case. Do not make me wait. I'm already quite upset, if you couldn't tell. Hitoshi watched as the officers reached out for them once more, but Nezu raised a swift paw. And remove the chains from these children immediately. They can wait in here with Kayama, Aizawa, Yamada, and Shujinshi. They're not monsters, just scared. Nezu has never been one to lose his temper and get upset easily. He is an expert at masking what he feels because he likes hiding his thoughts from others. It made it much easier to tear his enemies down. He sat in an empty room, quietly tapping his paws together, staring at the door in thought. He heard the entire situation go down in room 931, and it was enough to make his blood boil. How could they treat children like that, let alone children who just found out their close friend was gravely injured? Although Nezu didn't let it show, arriving after USJ and seeing his students so frantic tore his heart apart, because these kids he was responsible for. He didn't want them to feel fear. It was Kaminari who ran up to him with tears in his eyes, and Sarah gripped his hand to comfort him, the blonde sobbing about the vigilantes that saved their lives. Of course, Nezu didn't have to ask which vigilantes were involved. He knew right away, as he noticed Aizawa unconscious on the ground, and he was aware of his affiliation with the three, although he decided to let it go. If it was keeping them alive, he would not share secrets. And then there was Yamada screaming, and that was enough to justify his suspicions were true. The door opened as Nezu watched Tsukachi with Sansa Tamakawa behind him. No other officers to join them. Santana's the best we got, I assure you. Tsukachi took a seat, and I contacted our chief of police. Surigame says he'll come down if deemed necessary. I've sent the other top officers to watch over the vigilantes. I'm glad, Nezu said, a little sharper than intended, still wanting for more people to join them. It wasn't long until the tall young woman with long blonde hair casted down past her knees entered, pale yellow eyes scanning the room as she pursed her lips with a tight frown. Pale yellow eyes scanned the room with her lips turned into a frown. Star, Nezu greeted. I'm glad you could make it. She frowned further. Heard something happened to my green bean. I hadn't seen him in a while. Obviously, I'm here to take care of what needs to be done. And please, Omori is just fine. I'm off duty. She took a seat and crossed her legs spewed about carelessly. Who else are we waiting for? A few other of the heroes who worked alongside, plus some other heroes I decided to invite. They might have a different perspective on our situation. Nezu waited a few more minutes until the other two underground heroes arrived, both looking slightly upset and concerned. Shadow? Mindbuster? Nezu smiled. The older man hummed and shook his blue hair from his eyes. I don't believe we met properly. My name is Kagasuko. This is Habaki Nishiyama. Hi, the brunette beamed. I don't really know what's going on. Omori snorted and patted the two seats next to her. When have you ever, Hobby? Rude. Aizawa grunted to his fellow underground heroes as they immediately rushed to make sure he was okay, introducing themselves to Present Mike and Midnight excitedly. Yagi snuck past unnoticed with Shuzenshi, and that was nearly everyone as Nezu stared at the clock. The room was tense for a few minutes that passed by. Nezu decided to let the anxiety build until a sharp knock at the door made everyone jump slightly. Ah, glad we're in town. This case sounds interesting. The pro hero hopped into the room with her fists planted on either side of her hips. Let's get this shit started. The two took the last seat and Nezu leaned back. I'm glad to have you both here as an outsider's perspective. It would help if things become too personal. The white-haired woman flashed a huge toothy grin. Of course. Hawks and I are happy to help. Ain't that right? Nezu couldn't help but thin his eyes in determination. He had a goal, a responsibility. He wouldn't let talent like the five upstairs in room 931 go to waste. What is discussed in this room will remain private for the time being, Nezu began, and nothing but respect will be shown in this room since this involves two of my students. I will not allow anyone to put the blame on their shoulders. Today we'll be discussing the three vigilantes, in which our underground heroes present have worked closely with. Omori, Suka, and Noshiyama all nodded in unison. Aizawa sitting completely still. So this is about chaos, along with Morphine and Blaze? Omori clarified. What happened to him? Nezu clicked his tongue. Patience. I'll go through all the information I have. Hawks and Miracle here are new to the case, so they need all the information we can provide. Actually, Hawks raised a finger, we've heard quite a bit about this trio. They're quite well known amongst heroes in this area. Miracle nodded. Yeah, actually, we've heard really good things. The blonde cringed. Except from Endeavor. Yeah, except from Endeavor. Nezu put that piece of information deeper into his mind for later and hummed. Yes, the three have always been very careful. They haven't given anyone fatal injuries as far as we know, and put civilians and victims first. In my eyes, they're comparable to heroes. Although I do understand what they do is unfortunately illegal. Nezu smiled encouragingly and looked over to Omori. Yuri Omori, pro hero star. You were the first to run into chaos, is that correct? Yeah, I think so. Good. Tell me everything you know about him. Oh my goodness. Hell yeah. I'm like so happy that Nezu is actually pissed off. Like, because also what they did to those kids was rude. Like, inhumane. Like, really? But it looks like some justice will be served because Tsukachi and his little power trip and then putting Aizawa through that bullshit. What? But that should be about it for now. That's enough of my ranting for this chapter. Loved it to pieces. We'll be working on the next one very soon, of course. And of course, if you want to hear more of this, you know what to do.